The current spirituality and the holistic world preach that the ego separates you from transcendence and blocks the spiritual development. Therefore, you should destroy your ego. No, the ego does not separate you from transcendence. The ego was created by transcendence. The ego is able to learn to follow the soul, the transcendence. But yes, the ego does separate you from transcendence. There is indeed one scenario where this happens, the third dimension. This separation is extremely healthy and temporary. I'm Cavalher. The teachings of the current spirituality and the holistic world vary a little bit from one author to another, but the idea that most of them repeat is more or less like this. The ego separates you from transcendence because it generally is full of selfishness, vanity, and pride. That prevents you from following the soul. So either you keep your ego and is unable to follow the soul, or you destroy your ego in order to follow the soul. This view creates duality, opposition, or this or that. Duality is typical of third-dimensional lines of thought. Creating duality is not something that the holistic world should do, because holos means all, wholeness, totality. Obviously, the totality must not have any exceptions. You can't reach the totality and remove the ego at the same time, because totality will then lack something, the ego. In previous videos, I showed that the opposition created by the current spirituality, or the ego or the soul, does not necessarily exist. It's perfectly possible that the ego exists in harmony and unity with the soul. Instead of being killed, the ego can be educated in order to learn how to follow the soul and unite itself with transcendence. In this video and the next one, you will see that the soul teaches the ego directly. Stay tuned. Do you prefer to murder a part of yourself or go through a process of learning? But today I am going to say the exact opposite of everything I have said until now. The ego is indeed separated from transcendence. No, I am not going crazy. I am crazy already. Nor am I contradicting myself, although it looks like that. I ask you, please, the opportunity of showing you a different perspective. In my opinion, the current spirituality and the holistic world propose to skip a stage of the psychological and spiritual development, the third dimension, and go straight to the fourth dimension. But skipping stages of development is always a loss of time, because you don't develop things that are required in later stages. You will end up having to go back. I agree with the holistic world in 2 points. Transcendence must direct the development, and the ego's pride must be broken. Transcendence, the soul, directs the development in the fourth dimension. The soul's action is as follows. The soul creates problems you can't solve because they transcend your current level of consciousness. For instance, you become unable to have enough money, you become unable to find a boyfriend, or you can't heal an illness. You try to solve these problems in every possible way, but fail. That breaks your ego's pride. There comes a time when you are in deep pain and can't stand it any longer. Have you ever felt that? The inability to solve such problems and pain is usually the reason why people start their spiritual journeys and encounter their souls. In the next video, I'll describe the 4D process better. Can you see how the 4D process resembles the process described by the holistic world? But if both processes resemble, what's the problem with the holistic world's teachings? The problem is that the ego is key in this process, and in order to do its role, it must exist. The ego can't be destroyed. Let's see what Carl Jung, the creator of Jungian psychology, has to say about that. In order to comprehend that, it is important to understand the previous stage of development, the third dimension. The third dimension is the dimension of the ego. The majority of mankind is now at this stage. In this stage, you want everything to be your way, the way your ego wants. You are sure that you are going to change the world, and changing the world is forcing the world to adapt to your point of view. You want things in the company you work for to be exactly the way you want, the way you believe to be right, and when things happen differently, you are outraged. You want to choose someone to date in accordance with your expectations, and you want that person to behave the way you expect. You want to live life the way you imagined and is wrathful or sad when things don't happen that way. All of that happens when the ego is in control. But the ego being in control is not a problem in 3D. The same way a baby crawls first and walks later, the ego must control things and be later defeated by the soul. These are just stages of development. In 3D, the ego wants to control everything, but in that process you build a functional life in the material world. You study, you work, you build a career and a family, and you develop a personality. The ego is getting stronger and stronger. You are getting stronger. Development in the third dimension is pretty hard. Think again. In 3D, you need to study, work, and build a career, a family, and a personality. It is about building a whole life. That's why in 3D, the ego is separated from the soul, the transcendence. Imagine if, besides surviving adolescence, studying, working, making money, building a career, dating, getting married, having children, having a family, and building a personality, you still needed to at the same time go through problems you can't solve, frustrations and pain, in order to break your pride, vanity, and selfishness, in order to develop a relationship with your soul. I'm tired just by saying all that. It would be maddening. That's why the soul gives you a break in 3D. The soul doesn't do anything, it remains still, while the ego conquers things first, conquers a life first. The soul lets the ego crawl before it teaches the ego to walk spiritually. Therefore, 3D people are not guilty of not following transcendence. Following the soul or not is not their choice to make. 3D people are unable to follow the soul because the soul doesn't want them to. The soul itself wants to remain hidden in the backstage, waiting that the 3D development comes to an end. Believing that you are guilty of the separation between the ego and the soul, and that you need to destroy the ego in order to unite yourself with transcendence, is a complete illusion. Illusions are by no means harmless. Illusions are extremely dangerous. Illusions imprison your consciousness. Illusions are convictions. Convictions that imprison you in illusory realities. This illusion imprisons you in which reality? When you try to destroy your ego ahead of time, all the 3D development collapses and the fourth dimension becomes inaccessible. You skip adolescence and become a frustrated and resentful adult. You won't have professional and financial achievements that would be the material structure of a healthy life. You won't have a love relationship and a family, and will remain needy and alone. You will be unfulfilled. You won't develop the strong personality and self-esteem that are required to be a healthy person and indispensable for the difficult tasks brought by the soul in the next dimension. You become weak. Don't allow this illusion to imprison you. Leave it behind. Destroying illusions is an act of courage, because destroying illusions is destroying convictions that you publicly stood for and seeing the life you have built on this illusion collapse. Destroying illusions is liberating because it opens the access to new realities. In this new reality, you are strong. You lived what you wanted to live when you were a teenager. You have striven to study and now have knowledge. You have striven to work and now you have professional and material accomplishments. You have a love relationship and you have built a family. You have built a personality and self-esteem. Of course, you did not accomplish all that to the highest degree. Nobody does. But the important thing in this stage is the spirit of fighting for these things. The victories you have are enough to make you strong. Now, with a strong ego, you are ready for the manifestation of the transcendence. Now, with a strong ego, you are ready to face the challenges that the soul will bring during your fourth dimensional development. Each challenge makes you destroy a part of your ego until the end of 4D. In the last instant of 4D, your ego will die. Yes, in the next video, the last one of this series, I will say the exact opposite of everything I said until now. The death of the ego is not an illusion. The death of the ego does exist. However, it is not you who kills the ego. The soul kills the ego, and you won't like it.